It's finally time for the Gusta video. Well, kind of. Welcome viewers, I'm Vivet Veritas, and today I wanted to actually talk about Deltarune properly again since it's been a little while. I do love actually having a complete, comprehensive piece of media to analyze, but part of the fun with doing Deltarune analysis is not knowing where it's going to go. Rather than looking at a specific theme, such as darkness, freedom, or protagonists, I wanted to cast a gaze towards the future, that being Chapter 3 of Deltarune. I doubt I'll be breaking any particularly new ground with the ideas that I have, but since half my videos are born out of frustration that people aren't thinking enough about the themes of Deltarune, I thought I may as well. Who knows, I might even bring up something that you haven't thought of before. I'm also not going to be looking much further into the future of Deltarune, as the more I talk with a lack of evidence, the more likely whatever I say will be wrong, and I have an insatiable need to be right all the time. There is, of course, a lot to try to predict about the upcoming chapter, and I'm very excited to be wrong about whatever I do end up deciding on. However, I think the thing that is most interesting to me is, surprising no one, the secret boss of Chapter 3. I think we can almost guarantee that there will be one, from Shawm's dialogue, sorry for misgendering you in my previous video, bud, to the clear thematic role they are playing, so hopefully that prediction is pretty safe. I'm here to try to figure out, based on the actual meta-textual and thematic construction of Deltarune, what this upcoming secret boss might be all about. Of course, the identity of this secret boss is the most relevant aspect to many people. However, I'd also like to think about how it may interact with Chris and the general personality. After all, what makes Spamton and Jevil interesting characters aren't the object they're based off, but rather their personality and how they play their part in the themes of Deltarune. This is quite an undertaking, so let's go through this methodically. Join me, won't you? The first stage in something like this is to always take stock of what we already have. Our two secret bosses that currently exist, Jevil and Spamton, have certain similarities, and we can decide whether or not these are likely to repeat. The most salient similarity is that they are both individuals discarded from the plot or focus of the story. This matches with what objects they represent, Jevil being the Joker card, which is often discarded from most card games, and Spamton being spam emails, which are often removed from the inbox, both being generally unwanted and unused. I'm confident locking this in, as it is a recurring trend due to Chris's own evident experiences with feeling unwanted due to their material nature. Chris naturally follows and dictates a lot of the themes of Deltarune as they're the protagonist, so it makes sense that their most sensitive battles would do the same. Being unwanted and discarded is a bit of a theme with Rouse and Susie as well, so let's lock that one in. Secondly, the existing secret bosses both have shadow crystals. This is also one I'm very confident in locking in based on what Shawm tells us about the shadow crystals, but considering I actually haven't got a proper theory about what the shadow crystals are that I feel confident about, I'm not sure what this means for a future secret boss. The best I can guess is that at the very least they'll have some kind of metatextual knowledge about their own existence, though of course it's difficult to tell if the shadow crystal is the cause of that. It clearly lets you see something, but I'll let Jaru deal with that one. The most salient thing about the shadow crystals is that Shawm tells us that without the shadow mantle, we won't be able to defeat the upcoming secret boss, which tells me that they must have some deeper connection to darkness than the ordinary secret bosses. Perhaps even the overlap of darkness and holiness. The third point, which I think is the most significant, is that they have to be tied to the theme of freedom somehow. I've talked at length about my opinions on freedom in Deltarune in the video I made, but needless to say it's very integral to understanding how the secret bosses work, which is pretty obvious on a surface level. Both Jevil and Spamton, due to their circumstances, have very specific opinions regarding freedom that are partially informed by their identity. It is a little harder to tell as it is also just part of their personality, but it's not impossible to guess that a clown/joker would see themselves as absolutely free with everything else being a game, and a spam email would want to be the biggest shot in the world. The fourth similarity is their absolute banger of a battle theme. Any other similarities are ones I am less hesitant to confidently impose upon any candidate for secret bossage. These include having the potential for elaborate boss battles, having links to Rouse and Susie, having part of their bodies become weapons or armor as loot, being sexy to a very specific group of people, being divorced, having an explicit connection to Gasta, living somewhere undesirable, and more. Of course, it is possible that the upcoming secret boss could fill none of these qualities, or all of them. However, I need something to go by, so this is the furthest I'm willing to go into theorizing. Now that we've been over some of the qualifying conditions, let's have a look at our options. Almost. I do want to mention a particular individual before we go any further. Mike. Now, this video at its core is attempting to identify the object that the secret boss is based on and whatever may come from that, but it's still worth mentioning. Mike is mentioned by name by Spamton, our existing secret boss, and initially I pretty much discarded it. A lot of people were thinking Mike was going to be the next secret boss or just a normal boss, but I was unconvinced. Mostly because it is also the name of the host of a particular commercial advertising big shots, Mike Ditka. Yeah, I didn't really put it past Toby to just make that a reference in and of itself. After the sweepstakes though, I'm a bit more lenient to consider him as, at the very least, a major player in some way. To be clear, I still don't think he's going to be the secret boss. Although Spamton does mention Jevil, it feels out of character for the writing of Deltarune to foreshadow a future secret boss. It kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? Jevil mentions the Queen, which is obvious foreshadowing for Chapter 2, so I think it's much more likely that Mike is the boss of Chapter 3, but that still seems pretty unlikely considering what we know about him and his interactions with Tanner. Maybe Tanner is the boss? Or the secret boss? Who knows? Not me. I'm not even sure if Toby knows. I would love to do a full Mike/Tanner video, but that feels a bit too much speculation with little evidence for me, and I also make one video every 3 months, and Chapter 3 will probably come out before I finish it. We do have a bit of an advantage with Chapter 3 Secret Boss, as we know, hopefully, whether Darkwood is actually going to take place. We'll make a bit of an assumption and limit it to things inside or very near the house. Let's see, are there any standout items that could be representative of the secret boss? Or let's just, literally any object? That's not incredibly specific. Let's try to narrow it down a bit. Something with thematic weight, something we're familiar with, and something that could have something to do with freedom. Let's table our main contestants.
All the way from the trash can where half of the Deltarune community lives, it's the idea that's taken off in fan theories, carrying the strong scent of fresh divorce papers. It's the discarded flowers from Asgore. These fine specimens can not only stand in for literally any trauma that exists within the Dreamer household, but also has the added bonus of just being able to repurpose assets from the Omega Flowery battle for anyone wanting to trick children online. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a knife. If we're in the wheelhouse of Undertale imagery, why not everyone's favourite murder child's accessory? Now guaranteed to make everyone think you're evil. Chris probably has 100 of these bad boys down the side of their bed, so surely one's developed an insatiable need to break free of their knifeness. Coming in at £666 for an entire different goddamn game, it's everyone's favourite non-entity, WD Gasta. You think you'd be saved for the very end for some kind of spectacular reveal in the story, but your first mistake was thinking you knew fucking anything about this goopy scientist.
Oh, what do you mean Gasta isn't a proper option? It could technically be him. Fine, I guess it's the TV remote. Losers. Of course there is a very obvious other candidate. Something we haven't seen yet. What's more secret than something that's a secret to the player itself? However, that opinion's strength of rampant speculation comes with a weakness of solely relying on rampant speculation. I don't think my credentials are high enough to make a whole video saying the answer is fuck you, so we'll put that in the same pile as the knight is someone we haven't met before. Now that we've established our 3.5 contestants, let's compare them and see how they hold up against my incredibly rigorous and relevant diagnostics. Firstly, the discarded flowers, which is how I'll be referring to them and hope the rest of you understand. This is easily the most popular idea that I've seen floating around when it comes to the identity of the new secret boss, probably because it fits so nicely into our first diagnostic, that being something that is abandoned. Not only are these flowers obviously physically disposed of, the sentiment that they represent, the love that Asgore has/had for Toriel, has also been disposed of in this act. It's a really great marriage, pun intended, of the two ideas and seems ripe for a secret boss. The odds of a bunch of discarded flowers having a shadow crystal or being tied to darkness seems just as likely as the others. With the law of the Dark World seemingly being invented when the world is made, it's entirely possible that the flowers could have received a shadow crystal or hidden away in the darkness of the trash. What that would mean for the flowers is less clear, though it's possible that they would use the forbidden knowledge that seems to be paired with them, could tie into them seeing their role created to be a peace offering now discarded, wanting to become their own thing and perhaps inviting violence for that reason. In terms of the theme of freedom, this one's a little harder for the discarded flowers. Nothing immediately stands out, but I do genuinely think it could be interesting to have a kind of meta commentary of what would be expected from a flower boss after the success of Undertale. These games are full of self-referential humor, so that could be used for a bit of tragedy. Outside of that, the standard doesn't want to be what they were made for, as previously mentioned, works alright for our purposes. My main problem with this idea, though, is a bit of a weird one. It feels too personal, but also not personal enough at the same time. Already we've seen the two secret bosses clearly being in conversation thematically with Chris, but the items that represent them have nothing to do with them unless Chris is a big fan of Joker and it hasn't been mentioned. When it comes to the discarded flowers, the sentiment that they represent surely has impacted Chris, but the problem with a specific sentiment is precisely the specificity. Toriel's distrust and dislike for Asgore isn't something Chris can really relate to in the same way they can relate to Spamton's feeling of being controlled, for example. That isn't to say that Chris can't relate towards the general feelings of family/paternal abandonment, but it feels like a boss representing the flowers would be better suited for the normal final boss, a coalescence of the familial issues at the core of the Dreamer household. Secondly, Chris's knife. I do specify Chris's knife, as it does seem like they have a specific knife that they use, whether it's to eat cake or to do other nefarious jobs such as plug in the TV. Of course, Toby has already highlighted the knife with both a fake out at the end of chapter 1 and presumably an actually important case, the end of chapter 2, so it's clear that it's an item that has some narrative significance. Whether that significance is going to be paid off immediately remains to be seen. In terms of it being discarded, that seems, well, unlikely. It is something that Chris frequently uses from what we've seen, having used it to cut the pie and create a dark fountain at the very least, which isn't really in line with the manner that we've seen the other objects the secret bosses are based on. There is definitely an argument to be made that the knife is a very simple tool that is only brought out somewhat randomly when the story needs it, so its fate being tied to whatever the story needs could be relevant to the conversation of being discarded, but I'm not sure myself. Personally, I think as far as forbidden knowledge and shadow crystals go, the knife actually has some decent odds, mostly because it has actually opened a dark fountain. The shadow crystals definitely have something to do with darkness on a lot of levels, see my darkness video for more on that, and Chris's knife is definitely the object outside of Chris and Susie themselves that has had the most interactions with darkness out of anything within the Dreamer household that we know of. A knife being aware of its purpose being inherently to cut and pierce could be interesting, both in embracing that nature or trying to turn away from it. It could realistically pair quite well with Chris, and honestly could be a very interesting mirror for Susie, but she's not really been the focus so far. Speaking of Chris, the freedom theme surrounding the game does relate to the knife a bit. After all, if you're being controlled by some kind of puppeteer, what else better to cut the strings and make them ring than a knife? The inherent violence tied to a knife is a good pairing with this. Exploring how violence and freedom are connected in Deltarune would be a great use of a secret boss, especially considering the previous weird route being predicated upon violence much more than the normal route, which a previous boss, Spamton, was quite present and even vital for. So the knife definitely has some points going for it, no pun intended this time. It would make sense as a boss from a game making perspective, but it doesn't really fit with the precedent set by the other two bosses. It also does kind of suffer from it being very personal. It is something that is within Chris's possession, and regardless of how attached they actually are to it, still makes it a bit of a hard one to make into a secret boss. However, I definitely don't want to rule it out. Like the discarded flowers, plenty of thematic evidence behind it. Third up to bat, it's the TV remote. This is one I've barely seen mentioned within theorizing circles, but when it has been, I think it actually makes a fair bit of sense. It hasn't had much of a role to play in this story yet, which is honestly a point in its favour. The TV is clearly going to be pretty important in Chapter 3, so looking at what is related to it is, from a gameplay perspective, quite sound. May have sounded a little dismissive in my initial inclusion of it, but I do truly believe it's worth the effort to discuss its pros and cons. Remotes may not have a clear initial connection to the idea of being discarded, but if we look a little closer, there's actually something a bit more interesting. TV remotes are, after all, one of the things most often lost down the side of a couch or underneath a pillow. I don't exactly have any stats to back that claim up, but it's definitely relevant. Of course, a TV remote is still useful, unless the TV it's connected to isn't even plugged in anymore and is covered in dust. It doesn't seem like the TV in the Dreamer household has been used in some time, likely due to the various dysfunctions plaguing the family, but it's quite possible that it was rather active during the time that the family was together and Chris and Azrael were growing up together. Not only has the remote been discarded, but the memories of them have been discarded too. Regarding shadow crystals, the point was already a little sketch to begin with, and the remote works probably the worst out of the three with it. The remote doesn't really have any inherent connections to darkness outside of it being hidden in the couch, which would be dark, I guess, and the true knowledge that comes to the identity of a TV remote doesn't really invoke any particularly strong imagery, at least not for me. It could definitely be a more actually villainous character compared to someone like Spamton, who's mostly just in it for himself, as the control inherent to the identity of a remote control could be an interesting shadowy puppet master. On the freedom theme, I think the TV remote speaks for itself. It's a remote control. If there's anything that connects to both the themes of freedom and escapism within Deltarune, a thing that controls a device that contains in-universe media is one of the best to do it. Not only that, but it is also getting bonus points from being tied emotionally to Chris without being too hyper-specific. As mentioned previously, it's quite possible that the TV was a cornerstone in Chris's childhood with Azrael, as TV is for many people. The experiences with that and how having to control the TV slowly fell to the wayside may invoke the feeling of loss in both Chris and the player. Like an old friend discarded, Chris may have to come face to face with the nostalgia of their childhood, the escapism of the media it contained, and the control that it is tied to. Honestly, the TV remote makes a pretty strong case for itself by the standards of my made-up metrics, despite how little it's talked about. It makes sense since there is a lot to go through in just one household, but I think it definitely can have a role to play. My main point of umbrage with it, as an idea, is that I think the role is simply too big to be a secret boss. The TV remote isn't something that's inherently discardable, and with its relation to the TV itself, which is clearly going to be important in the upcoming chapter, I would be surprised if whatever character the remote is based on is squirreled away in a secret area. Sure, Spamton wasn't exactly secret as a character, but was as a boss, so maybe that would be the case for the remote. Regardless, there are pros and cons for this one too.
Number 4, W.D. Gaster. It's not him.
Well, we've gone through them all and come to some important conclusions. The most important conclusion being that I can't agree with myself even when I'm the one making the rules. All of our three options have some pretty strong positives and some pretty strong negatives, so which one do I think is the one that will be the true secret boss of Chapter 3? Well, of course, with the evidence provided, you are all free to make your own decisions. I think all three of the ones I've presented today have some strong thematic and metatextual evidence for them, but out of those, I think I like the TV remote idea the most. The way that it combines the themes of freedom and escapism is incredibly elegant, and it would be entirely possible for it to act as a major character but have its actual battle be locked behind strange and esoteric conditions like Spamton. Cool, we're done. Great work, everyone. We found a bunch of ideas and discussed their strengths and weaknesses. We're all free to make our own conclusions from the data now, and it's all very fun. Why is the video still going? I did what I set out to do, right? Ah, you want a definitive answer. Of course. Well, let me spin my story, For me personally, the most important thing is which one simply makes the most sense, thematically speaking, which one satisfies my strained textual whimsy. Well, the flowers are definitely an interesting idea, but I just can't bring myself to believe Toby would make another flower-based boss, at least not one so deliberately evocative of Flowey, regardless of how thematically interesting it was. Even if there was one, I would be less surprised to see Flower King become part of a Dark World and have it show up there, but even then I think it would be a small tongue-in-cheek reference more than anything else. The knife is just too close to Chris, both literally and metaphorically, for me to wholeheartedly endorse it as a candidate for secret bossage, even though it would be pretty sick to see, as I think its role has yet to fully blossom. It is a bit too useful and frequently used for me to really consider it alongside the discarded nature of the existing secret bosses. The TV remote, although I do think the theme of freedom is incredibly strong with it, its problem surrounding how little it actually has to do with being discarded and the theme of darkness isn't quite strong enough, and its inherent usefulness, regardless of whatever I have to say about its secret battle, is still a big sticking point. Between the three of them, they all have one particularly strong area, but also one particularly weak area. Honestly, out of all of them, the one with no weaknesses is the idea that it's something we haven't seen yet, but that also doesn't really have any strengths, which is a type of weakness, I guess? Is that really it? Those are the three best options I could think of, and none of them give us a compelling answer? The best idea I can come up with is that it's just someone we don't know? Sure, each one has its strengths, but the perfect candidate must have no weaknesses. The script is already like 3,000 words long, and you're saying that all of this effort has amounted to nothing? No, surely there has to be something I've forgotten, something I've been neglecting. Someone. Oh god, it's him. W.D. Guster is the key to all of this. Chris's history with the bunker, Azrael being absent, Toriel and Asgul's divorce, it all ties back to Gaster. Obviously, Chris has encountered Gaster before the bunker. Chris is terrified of it, and the bunker is already connected to Gaster with the background music. They have a personal, salient, and terrifying connection with the good doctor himself already, so clearly the best place for him to show up and reveal himself as a secret mastermind is in their own home. Gaster is a doctor, right? Like a professor of some kind. Clearly, Azrael is learning from Gaster in his time at college how to be a real mysterious, secretive person cloaked in darkness, which is why Azrael really is just Rousey. Rousey will guide Chris to the Gaster in the Dark World, as he's actually been hiding in the computer with the Undertale joke in it as a meta-commentary on how Gaster is cut content from Undertale. Toriel and Asgul's divorce likely relates to Asgul getting fired from the police force, which in turn is likely due to Dessa's disappearance. Dessa's disappearing might even have something to do with the bunker, but even if it doesn't, she's still the older sister of the girl who loves cut content and Easter eggs like Gaster is, and might be trapped in the code of the game itself. It's Gaster, baby! Not to mention, Toriel's current romantic partner possibly is Sans, whose connections with Gaster have been established time and time again. And of course we would need the Shadow Mantle to defeat Gaster. There's no way we would be able to stand up to the Doctor of Darkness without it, whatever it actually is. Maybe the Shadow Mantle is even Gaster's old lab coat or something, but regardless, that will play a vital role too. Gaster is at the heart of every single problem that plagues both Chris and the Dreamers from a literal and emotional standpoint. Not only that, but if chapters 3, 4, and 5 are all going to drop at the same time, then it's the perfect time to reveal Gaster in the story itself as the secret boss in chapter 3, and then going on to establish himself as a bigger player in the following chapters until ending on the cliffhanger of chapter 5's ending of him revealing the vessel and shunting your soul out of Chris and into it. It's genius. It's perfect. It's sorry, I'm getting a cold. Hello? Yes, this is a stupid bit. Oh, okay. Thanks, boss. So, remember when I said that my credentials aren't enough to just say that the secret boss is fuck you? I hope you do. It was only a few minutes ago. The thing is, if it wasn't clear, I don't think Gaster is the secret boss of chapter 3. I also don't think it's something we haven't seen yet. I don't know if any of them are, and I have to know. When I said that a prediction has to have no weaknesses for me to believe it, that wasn't a joke. You can probably tell by my previous videos that I don't like making firm predictions about future chapters. If I'm going to put my name to a theory or idea, I want it to be as waterproof as possible, and at this stage in Deltarune's life cycle, I just can't really. I think the conclusion that there are a few options that could be really interesting and compelling, even with their weaknesses, is pretty good, all things considered. Making a firm 100% convincing prediction about the future of Deltarune is a fool's errand, and it ends up veering incredibly quickly into rampant speculation, gaster, or both. But that's what I love so much about textual analysis, about looking at the way games are written with metaphor and subtext and themes and thinking, why? Why is this the case? Why even are there secret bosses? Why are they linked to freedom? Why should we even bother thinking about them? Everything I've said in this video, aside from the gaster tangent, I fully believe. I believe in the thematic and narrative strength of Deltarune enough to try to understand it deeper and trust that there is something worthwhile in the activity of it. Analysis for the sake of analysis might be boring and safe and predictable for some, but for me it's the most entertaining part of theorizing because it makes you ask questions and not find solutions just to have an answer. Some problems don't have an answer, especially when we can't see the whole picture yet. At the end of the day, I can say only this in full confidence. Whatever the secret boss is for Chapter 3 will have their very nature shrouded in darkness. And also have an absolute banger of a battle theme. Yeah! And here we are again. This one was quite different to what I normally do since I actually tried to answer a question, but like my forefathers before me, I will use that question to leap headfirst into weirdly emotional esoteric analysis. Hope you all enjoyed this, and despite my philosophizing about the nature of Deltarune theorizing, actually enjoyed the proper analysis, which I'm honestly really proud of. I really wanted to make a video with some nitty-gritty analysis on the level of the greats, and although I'm not sure if I made it that far, it is still something that I think is actually pretty cool. As always, thank you so much for the support on the videos. I am a little worried about the performance of this video considering the pattern my videos have followed so far, but as long as I don't upload this on a Tuesday, we will hopefully be okay. Regardless of how well it does, I think this video is well made for what I do, so I'm happy regardless. A reminder that I've got a Patreon that you can check out to fund my projects, and a massive thank you to the people who have signed up so far. I am very lucky to have so many people care about the stuff that I make. One last announcement before we end for today. The next video I have in the pipeline is a very different one than normal, and I'm having a lot of fun making it already. I'll finish it up soon, hopefully, as it shouldn't be too long, but I'm very, very interested in how it's going to go. Hope that you'll all join me next time for a grand tale of time and darkness. Until next time, I've been Vivid Veritas, and I'll see you all again soon.